If I hadn't opened that door, I might still feel safe in the silence of my own heart. The cabin stood alone, a weathered sentinel swallowed by the pine forest's endless shadows, its wooden walls groaning under the weight of secrets older than me. I came here to escape, to cradle the raw wound of my mother's death, gone 3 weeks now, her voice fading like a song I could no longer sing. Her absence was a hollow ache, a ghost that followed me from the city to this forsaken place. The sky churned with dark clouds, promising a storm that mirrored the chaos inside me. I didn't care. I wanted the world to rage as I did, to drown out the memories of her frail hands slipping from mine in that sterile hospital room. The cabin's interior was a time capsule of neglect, damp wood, dust thick enough to taste, and a faint mildew scent that clung to every surface. I dropped my bag on the sagging couch, the fabric exhaling a puff of musty air. The windows rattled softly, as if the forest outside was testing their strength. This was my sanctuary, chosen for its isolation, a place where no one could find me. I'd driven 6 hours through twisting mountain roads, my eyes burning, my heart heavy. The forest stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of silence that seemed to watch me as I moved. I lit a fire in the stone hearth, the flames crackling with a restless energy, casting shadows that danced like specters on the walls. I poured a glass of wine, its sharp bitterness grounding me, and sank into the couch, staring into the fire's hypnotic glow. She used to sit by the fire like this, I thought, remembering my mother's laughter, her stories of childhood winters. The memory stung, and I pushed it away, focusing on the warmth spreading through my chest. Night fell like a curtain, heavy and absolute. The storm arrived with a primal fury, wind howling through the trees, shaking the cabin as if it meant to tear it apart. Thunder rolled, each peal a hammer against my nerves. I lay in bed, the quilt a frail shield against the cold seeping through the walls. My mother's face haunted me, her smile, her voice, the way she'd braid my hair before bed. I squeezed, my eyes shut, willing sleep to come. But the storm's relentless assault kept me tethered to wakefulness. Then in the chaos I heard it, a faint tapping at the door, soft, almost lost in the wind's scream. My breath caught, my body rigid. I waited, hoping it was a trick of the storm, but it came again, sharper, more deliberate. Someone's out. There. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that drowned out the thunder. The cabin was miles from civilization, a forgotten speck in the wilderness. Who could possibly be here? I slid out of bed, the floorboards icy beneath my bare feet. The tapping grew urgent, fists hammering against the door, a desperate plea that sent chills down my spine. I grabbed a flashlight, its beam trembling in my hand, and crept toward the door. The pounding stopped abruptly, leaving a silence more terrifying than the noise. I pressed my ear to the wood, hearing only the storm's wail and my own pulse roaring in my ears. "Don't open it," a voice inside me warned, raw and instinctual. But what if someone was dying out there? I couldn't bear the thought of turning away. My hand shook as I turned the knob, the door groaning open to reveal a man standing in the rain. He was a specter in the storm, water streaming from his matted hair, plastering it to a forehead pale as bone. His shirt clung to his chest, dark stains blooming across the fabric, blood unmistakable in the flashlight's harsh glare. His eyes were wild, darting like a trapped animal's, and his breath came in ragged gasps. "Please," he said, his voice cracked and hoarse. "My wife, she's hurt. We crashed by the creek. You're the only one out here." His words spilled out, jagged with panic, but something in his gaze, too intense, too eager, made my skin crawl. I stood frozen, my mind racing. The creek was a half-mile away, a treacherous scar through the forest. A crash in this storm was plausible, but his story felt flimsy, like a lie stitched together in haste. "Show me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I grabbed my raincoat, the fabric heavy with damp, and followed him into the night, the storm swallowing us whole. The forest was alive, a writhing beast of shadows and sound. Branches clawed at my face, mud sucked at my boots, and the rain stung my eyes, blurring the world into a nightmare. The man, Robert he called himself, led the way, his flashlight beam jerking wildly as if he feared what it might reveal. We reached the creek, its waters black and swollen, churning with a hunger that made my stomach twist. The car was there, a crumpled wreck half submerged in a ditch, its metal frame groaning under the water's weight. Inside, a woman slumped against the dashboard, blood matting her hair, her face pale as moonlight through the cracked windshield. My chest tightened, a vice of fear and pity. She wasn't moving. Robert and I waded into the shallow water, the cold biting through my clothes like teeth. We pulled her free, her body limp and heavy, and carried her back to the cabin. The rain, lashing our faces, the forest watching our every step. I laid her on my bed, the quilt soaking up her blood like a thirsty sponge. My hands trembled as I cleaned her wound, the gash on her forehead deep and raw. I bandaged it as best I could, my fingers slick with crimson, her faint moans the only sign she was alive. Robert stood by the door, his silhouette framed against the storm's flicker, his breath uneven. His eyes never left her, but there was no tenderness in them, only a predatory focus that made my skin prickle. The cabin felt smaller now, its walls pressing in, the air thick with unspoken danger. I offered Robert dry clothes, my father's old flannel shirt and jeans, their familiar scent a fleeting comfort. I poured us wine, hoping to ease the tension coiling in my chest, and we sat by the fire, its warmth a frail shield against the cold dread seeping into my bones. "How did it happen?" I asked, my voice soft but probing, the wine glass cool against my palm. Robert sipped his drink, his fingers tightening around the glass until his knuckles whitened. "We were visiting her parents," he said, his tone flat, almost rehearsed. "The rain. I lost control." His words felt hollow, a script he hadn't memorized well. I pressed gently, asking where her parents lived, and his eyes flickered with confusion, his story unraveling like a frayed thread. He's lying, I thought, my unease blooming into fear. The firelight cast shadows on his face, sharpening his features into something feral, his smile too sharp, too knowing. I remembered a story my mother told me as a child, about a wolf in sheep's clothing, and the memory sent a shiver through me. "I need to rest," he said abruptly, standing and disappearing into the bedroom where the woman lay, his footsteps heavy on the creaking floor. Alone again, I locked the door, my hands clammy, the brass knob cold as ice. The cabin was a cage now, its isolation a trap rather than a refuge. I curled up on the couch, the flashlight clutched tight, its beam a fragile lifeline in the dark. Sleep was impossible, the storm's rhythm lulling me into a restless haze. Memories of my mother flooded back. Her laughter, her stories, the way she'd hold me during thunderstorms, promising the world was safe. But this world wasn't safe. A sudden warmth brushed my cheek like a breath too close, and my eyes snapped open. The woman stood over me, her hair dripping, her face ghostly in the dim light filtering through the windows. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, filled with a terror that mirrored my own. I opened my mouth to scream, but her hand pressed against it, silencing me. "Don't," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. "He's not my husband." Her words were a blade, slicing through the fog of my fear. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of panic that threatened to drown out her voice. "What?" I mouthed, my voice barely a breath. She leaned closer, her body trembling, her eyes darting toward the bedroom. "He took me," she said, her voice cracking like glass. "He's dangerous. Call the police." I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling, but the screen showed no signal, the storm's wrath cutting us off from the world. Panic surged through me, a tidal wave breaking over my senses. "He has a knife," she murmured, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with dread. I nodded, my mind racing, fragments of a plan forming in the chaos. My car keys were in the bedroom on the nightstand beside Robert. We had to move, had to escape before he woke. I crept toward the bedroom, the door groaning as I pushed it open, the sound deafening in the silence. Robert lay sprawled on the bed, his breathing deep and steady, the knife glinting faintly in his hand, its blade catching the storm's intermittent light. My pulse roared in my ears, each step a gamble with death. The floorboards sighed beneath me and I froze, my breath trapped in my chest. He stirred, mumbling something incoherent, his fingers twitching around the knife. I waited, my body taut, until his breathing steadied. I inched forward, my hand trembling as I reached for the keys, their cold metal a promise of freedom. Almost there. He rolled toward me, and I ducked, my heart lurching, my breath a silent scream. The keys were mine. I backed away, the woman's, hand finding mine in the dark, her grip desperate and clammy. We bolted for the door, the cabin's walls seeming to lean in, as if reluctant to let us go. The storm swallowed us as we ran, the car a distant beacon in the chaos. Rain stung my eyes, blurring the world into a nightmare of shapes and shadows. The woman sobbed beside me, her breath ragged, her steps faltering. I fumbled with the keys, my fingers numb, the car's engine coughing to life like a dying animal. We sped away, the cabin fading into the darkness, its silhouette a malevolent presence in the rearview mirror. The police station's lights loomed ahead, a frail promise of safety in the storm's heart. The officers took our statements, their faces grim as they called for backup. They found no trace of Robert at the cabin, only the woman's blood staining my sheets and a shattered wine glass, its fragments glinting like broken promises. "He's Robert Walsh," an officer said, his voice heavy with dread. "Escaped custody 2 weeks ago. You're lucky to be alive." I drive home now, the forest a blur outside my window, its shadows shifting like predators in the dawn's pale light. The woman's gratitude lingers in my mind, her tearful embrace a fleeting warmth against the cold fear that clings to me. But Robert Walsh is still out there, a ghost in the storm, his eyes haunting me in every flicker of movement. The cabin was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to mourn my mother in peace. Instead, it became a trap, its walls whispering of betrayal and survival. I grip the wheel, my knuckles white, and pray he never finds me again. But deep down, I know the forest keeps its secrets, and some doors, once opened, can never be locked again. The neon sign of the 7-Eleven pulsed like a heartbeat trapped in glass, its green and red glow bleeding into the fog that cloaked the highway. I gripped the wheel of my truck, my knuckles pale, my eyes burning from 23 hours of endless road. The world outside was a blur of shadows, and the cab smelled of stale coffee and sweat-soaked leather. That sign, it called to me, a lighthouse in the dark, promising warmth, light, a moment to feel human again. But my gut twisted, a warning I'd learned to heed after 15 years hauling freight through nowhere towns like this. Something was wrong. terribly wrong, and yet I couldn't drive another mile. I killed the engine and silence rushed in, heavy and suffocating. The fog pressed against the windshield, thick as wet cotton, and the air carried a faint sourness, like fruit left to rot. My bladder ached, my legs cramped, and my mind teetered on the edge of a dream I couldn't shake. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and scanned the lot. A single car sat in the corner, a rusted Civic plastered with faded stickers about mind control and alien cover-ups. Its windows were black, swallowing the neon glow. I told myself it was nothing, just another late-night stop, but my skin prickled as I crossed the lot, the fog curling around my ankles like fingers. Inside, the 7-Eleven was a sterile maze of harsh light and sticky floors. The air hit me like a slap. Burnt coffee, bleach, and something deeper, something organic like meat gone bad. Shelves of candy and chips glowed under fluorescent bulbs, their colors too vivid, too plastic, like props in a stage play. Behind, the counter stood the cashier, a scrawny kid, maybe 25. His eyes locked on a phone screen, his lips curled in a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, a secret amusement that made my stomach lurch. "Bathroom?" I asked, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. He pointed to the back without looking up, his fingers too long, joints bending at angles that seemed to defy bone. His nails were chewed raw, crusted with dark grime, or blood. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was exhaustion playing tricks. The store felt alive, its hum of fridges and flickering lights pressing against my skull. Every step echoed the floor clinging to my boots, peeling away with a sickening tug. I passed a display of energy drinks, their cans gleaming like eyes watching me. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Old Joe, a driver I'd met years ago at a diner in Nevada. He'd told me about a 7-Eleven he'd stopped at, somewhere off Route 50, where the cashier had stared too long, smiled too wide. Joe never made his next delivery. His truck was found days later, empty except for his logbook, the last page scrawled with frantic words. "It's in the mirror. Don't look." I shook it off. Trucker tales, nothing more. But my pulse hammered as I pushed open the bathroom door. The bathroom was a crypt of flickering light, one bulb stuttering like a dying insect. 2 stalls, a urinal crusted with filth, and a sink that dripped endlessly, each drop a sharp ping against porcelain. The air was thick, choking, a mix of urine and that sour rot from the store, now stronger, closer. I locked myself in the first stall, knees brushing the door, and tried to focus. "You're tired. Just do what you came for and get out." But the silence was wrong, too heavy, like the room was holding its breath. Then I heard it, breathing, slow and wet, a rasp like lungs filled with fluid. Came from the stall beside me, deliberate, alive. My heart lurched. "Sorry, man," I mumbled, embarrassed, thinking someone was there. No answer. Just that breathing, steady, watching. "It's nothing. You're imagining it." I repeated it, a mantra against the fear clawing my chest. But the silence that followed was worse. The breathing stopped, leaving a void that crushed my ears. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. Nothing. I finished quickly, hands shaking, and stepped out. The faucet's drip was louder now, each ping a nail in my spine. I leaned over, the sink splashing cold water on my face, trying to anchor myself. That's when I saw it in the mirror. A flicker of movement in the stall behind me, where the breathing had been. Long gray-white fingers curled around the door's edge, thin as bone. Too long, too wrong. My breath froze, my body locked, and I watched, helpless, as a figure began to emerge. It was the cashier, but not the kid from the counter. His shoulders hunched at an impossible angle, his eyes wide, pupils swallowing light like black holes. His smile stretched across his face, too wide, drool glistening at the corners. A predator's grin. "Did I scare you?" His voice was a cold whisper against my ear, though he stood 10 feet away. I lunged for the door, boots slipping on the slick tiles. The handle turned, but the door held fast, as if something pressed against it. The lights flickered, then died, plunging me into darkness. The stench of rotting meat filled my lungs, thick and suffocating. A cold finger grazed my neck, and I screamed, slamming my elbow back, hitting something solid. He grunted, but his grip tightened, fingers digging into my shoulders like talons. "Fight. You have to fight." I grabbed the metal trash can beside the sink, its weight grounding me, and swung it blindly. It connected with a crack, and he staggered, loosening his hold. I threw myself at the door again, twisting the handle with desperate strength. It gave way, and I stumbled into the store, gasping for air. The cashier was behind me, crawling on all fours, moving too fast, his head tilted at an angle that defied human bone. His smile never faltered, a grotesque mask of glee. "Lonely, so lonely," he sang, his voice a child's, mocking and cruel, echoing in my skull. I sprinted through the aisles, knocking over displays, chips and cans scattering like bones. His laughter followed, high and jagged, turning to screams of rage. "Come back." I reached the glass doors, fumbling with my keys, hands slick with sweat. Glancing back, I saw him in the doorway, perfectly still except for his head, tilted sideways, defying flesh and sinew. The fluorescent light flickered, casting his shadow across the lot, too long, with too many fingers waving at me. "Do it again," he shouted, as if this were a game, a sick ritual he'd played before. I dove into my truck, slamming the door, keys slipping twice before I jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared, and I floored it, tires screeching as I tore onto the highway. In the rearview mirror, he stood in the lot, unmoving, his shadow stretching toward me like a hand through the fog. I drove for hours, not stopping, not breathing right, until dawn broke, pale and cold. My hands shook, and the memory of his eyes, black voids sucking in light, burned into my mind. Back on the road, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every neon sign I passed seemed to flicker, green and red, like a signal calling me back. I stopped at a diner a week later, the TV blaring local news. A 7-Eleven employee had been arrested after complaints of a stench in the store's bathroom. Cops found dead animals, cats, dogs, raccoons, stuffed into vents and storage spaces, their bodies rotting for days. The employee, the same kid from that night, grinned at the camera, his eyes empty. When asked why, he said he didn't like being alone. The reporter's voice shook as she described his calm, like he was discussing the weather. I left my coffee untouched and walked out, my stomach churning. In my truck, I found it under the passenger seat, a single chewed fingernail, crusted with dried blood, not mine. I flung it out the window, but the smell lingered, that sour rot clinging to the air. At night, I dream of that 7-Eleven, its neon sign pulsing like a heartbeat, and his voice whispering through the fog. Do it again. I don't stop at convenience stores anymore, but sometimes on empty highways I see a flicker of green and red in the distance, and I wonder if he's still waiting, lonely, smiling, ready for the next game. The kitchen clock ticks softly, a metronome to my morning ritual. Coffee steams in my mug, its bitter scent grounding me in the quiet. I'm halfway through my second cup, savoring the warmth, when the phone shatters the calm. The ring is shrill, invasive like a scream trapped in metal. My hand trembles as I answer, and Mrs. Gallagher's voice spills out, choked with panic. "Mr. Derrick, the school's in lockdown. A student. He's got a gun." The mug slips, shattering on the tile. Coffee spreading like a dark wound. Bloom, my daughter, my only anchor since Claire's death, is trapped in that nightmare. My heart lurches, a beast clawing at my ribs, and I'm running before I can think. Keys biting into my palm. The air outside is sharp, slicing through my thin jacket as I fumble with the truck's door. Bloom's face haunts me. Her hazel eyes, her crooked smile, the way she clutches her inhaler when anxiety tightens her chest. She's 12, too young for this world's cruelty, yet here it is, clawing at her school. Room 214, second floor, left wing. I've walked that hall 100 times, dropping her off, waving through the window. Now it's a cage. The engine roars, tires screeching as I weave through traffic, red lights meaningless. The world blurs. A dreamlike haze, but the fear is real. A cold weight in my gut. Claire's voice echoes. 5 years buried but alive in my guilt. Protect her, Derek, promise me. The school emerges, a brick monolith ringed by chaos. Police cruisers block the road, their lights pulsing red and blue, a heartbeat of dread. Ambulances loom, silent predators, while parents cluster behind yellow tape, their cries a raw animal sound. I slam the truck into park, my boots hitting pavement before the engine quiets. Officer Brady, his face familiar from neighborhood barbecues, grabs my arm. "Derek, stay back, we're handling it." His voice is steady, but his eyes flicker, with doubt. "Bloom's in there," I rasp, my throat tight. "She has asthma, she could suffocate." Brady's grip tightens. "We'll get her. You can't go in." But his words are hollow, drowned by the image of Bloom, alone, gasping. Under a desk, I can't wait, not when every second feels like a blade. I slip through the crowd, their voices fading to a dull roar. My pulse hammers, a relentless drum as I circle to the school's rear. The loading dock is deserted, a forgotten seam in the building's armor. A window, barely open, catches my eye. I push it up, the wood groaning like a warning, and climb through, landing hard on the linoleum. Pain flares in my palms, but I ignore it, my senses sharpening. The hallway stretches before me, a tunnel of shadows lit by flickering red emergency lights. The air is stale, heavy with chalk dust and something acrid. Fear, maybe. Sirens wail, faintly outside, muffled by thick walls. But inside, the silence is oppressive, a living thing pressing against my chest. Every step echoes, a betrayal in the quiet. I hug the wall, my breath shallow, my eyes darting to every corner. Room 214 is close, but the path feels endless, each door a potential trap. A memory surfaces, Bloom's 5th birthday, her laughter as Claire spun her in the backyard, sunlight catching her hair. The image twists, replaced by her now, curled in terror, her inhaler useless in shaking hands. Keep moving, Derek. For her. A gunshot splits the air, glass shattering somewhere ahead. My legs lock, my heart a trapped bird. The sound lingers. A ghost in the hall, followed by a scream that cuts off too soon. I force myself forward, the red lights pulsing like a warning heartbeat. The left wing looms, doors locked tight, windows dark. Through one, I see her. Bloom crouched under a desk, her inhaler clutched like a lifeline. Her face is pale, lips tinged blue, breath shallow and frantic. 4 other kids huddle nearby, their eyes wide, faces streaked with tears. I push the door, my heart a fist in my throat, and slip inside. The room smells of sweat and fear, the air thick with their panic. "Bloom," I whisper, dropping to my knees. Her eyes meet mine, recognition sparking, but her voice is gone, stolen by terror. Her fingers tremble, the inhaler slipping. "Breathe, baby," I say, my voice breaking. Nice and slow, like we practiced. I guide her hands, pressing the inhaler to her lips. "Hold it. Count to 3. You're my girl." She inhales, A ragged gasp, her chest rising. Relief flickers, but a boy tugs my sleeve, his voice a terrified hiss. She's coming. My blood freezes. Footsteps echo, heavy, deliberate, a predator stalking its prey. A shadow stretches across the wall, long and warped, followed by a figure. He's young, no older than 18, his face marred by acne. But his eyes, God, his eyes are empty. Black pools swallowing the light. He grips a shotgun, its barrel glinting in the red glow. He hasn't seen us yet, his head tilted, listening. Move, Derek. Now. I shove Bloom against the wall, my body a shield. The gun roars, shattering the overhead lights, glass raining like deadly snow. The kids cry out, their voices piercing the dark. Bloom's nails dig into my arm, her breath hitching. The room spins, a nightmare I can't wake from. I grab a chair, its metal legs cold, and hurl it with all my strength. It slams into his ribs, the shotgun clattering to the floor. Run! I shout, my voice raw. The kids bolt, gripping each other, sobbing as they flee down the hall. Bloom's legs wobble, her breath short, but she moves, her hand in mine. The attacker recovers, his eyes locking on me, a predator scenting blood. He charges, his fist connecting with my jaw. Pain explodes, my vision blurring. We crash into the wall, plaster cracking. His hands relentless, pummeling my ribs, my face. Blood fills my mouth, coppery and warm. My body screams, but Bloom's face keeps me fighting. My fingers find the shotgun, its weight heavy, cold. I swing, the stock cracking against his skull. Bone gives way, blood splattering, a sickening warmth on my hands. He sags, moaning, a broken thing on the tile. I stagger to my feet, my body a map of pain, my breath ragged. The hallway blurs, but I push forward, driven by Bloom's image. Outside, I see her in Officer Brady's arms, her face buried in his chest, sobbing. Bloom! I shout, my voice a fractured thing. She breaks free, running to me, her arms outstretched. I catch her, holding her so tight I fear I'll break her. Her tears soak my shirt, her warmth a lifeline. I kiss her forehead, my own tears burning. I'm here, baby, you're safe. The world fades, the chaos a distant hum. Bloom's alive, her heart beating against mine. But the nightmare clings, a shadow I can't shake. At night, those empty eyes haunt me, the shotgun's roar echoing in my dreams. Bloom sleeps with the light on, her inhaler clutched tight. The school's closed, its hallways silent, but they'll never be empty, not for us. Every creak in the house, every shadow carries his face. I check the locks twice, my hands shaking, knowing safety is a lie. Bloom's laughter, once my salvation, now feels fragile, a flame flickering in a storm. I promised Claire I'd protect her, but at what cost? The world feels different now. A place where monsters wear human skin, waiting in the quiet. The house stared at me before I even stepped inside, its glass walls gleaming like eyes that knew too much. I stood on the polished driveway, my backpack heavy with textbooks I couldn't afford, my breath visible in the crisp evening air. The Carter's home loomed above, a modern fortress of sharp angles and cold surfaces, perched on a hill that seemed to sneer at the world below. I was here for the money, triple my usual babysitting rate, enough to keep my college dreams from crumbling, under tuition debts. But as I rang the bell, its chime echoing like a warning, I felt the house's gaze tighten as if it were sizing me up, deciding whether I'd leave alive. Mrs. Carter opened the door, her diamond earrings catching the light, her smile as thin as the ice in her voice. "Ethan's already fed and bathed," she said, tossing her purse over her shoulder. Her eyes flicked past me, never quite meeting mine. Mr. Carter stood behind her, jingling car keys, his face a mask of polite indifference. "We'll be back by midnight," Mrs. Carter added, her tone clipped as if I were an inconvenience they'd rather forget. They left without a backward glance, their car's taillights fading into the dusk, leaving me alone in a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. The air inside was sterile, scented with expensive candles that couldn't mask the underlying chill. The walls were adorned with abstract art, all sharp lines and muted colors, reflecting nothing but emptiness. I dropped my bag by the couch, its leather cold against my fingers, and tried to shake the unease creeping up my spine. Ethan was upstairs, a quiet 8-year-old with eyes too big for his face, sitting on his bed with a book he wasn't reading. His room was pristine, toys arranged with unsettling precision, as if no child had ever played here. "Hi, Ethan," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm Lisa." He didn't look up, just hugged his knees, his voice barely above a whisper. "He always comes when they leave. He likes girls like you." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through my chest. I laughed, more to calm myself than him. "Who's he?" I asked, expecting a childish tale of monsters or ghosts. But Ethan's eyes met mine, dark and unblinking, and he said nothing, pulling the covers to his chin and closing his eyes. I hesitated, my hand on the light switch, his words echoing in my mind. Just a kid's imagination, I told myself, but the house seemed to hum with agreement, its silence too heavy, too knowing. Back in the living room, I tried to study, my textbook, open to a page I couldn't focus on. The house was too quiet, its stillness a pressure against my ears. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump, every flicker of the chandelier's light a threat. I remembered my own childhood, sneaking into my brother's room during storms, giggling under blankets as we made up stories. Those nights felt safe, warm, a world away from this sterile cage. I pushed the memory aside, my pen scratching notes I wouldn't remember, until the doorbell shattered the silence at exactly 9 o'clock. My heart lurched, a cold wave washing over me. I checked the security monitor, my fingers trembling. A man stood at the door, tailored suit pristine, hair slicked back, smiling directly into the camera as if he knew I was watching. "Hi, Lisa," he said through the intercom, his voice smooth as silk, too smooth. "I'm Daniel, Ethan's uncle. Rachel said it's fine, just need some files from the study." My stomach twisted. No one had mentioned visitors. I pressed the intercom, my voice tight. I wasn't told anyone was coming. His smile widened, unperturbed. "Call Rachel if you want. She'll confirm." I dialed Mrs. Carter, my pulse hammering. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright, but strained. "Oh, Daniel, he's family, it's fine." Her words felt rehearsed, like she was reading a script. Against every instinct screaming in my chest, I opened the door. Daniel was taller than I expected, his presence filling the foyer like a shadow stretching too far. "Thank you," he said, brushing past me, his arm grazing mine, leaving a chill that lingered. "This won't take long." But it did. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the house's silence growing thicker, more oppressive. I checked on Ethan, finding him asleep, his face peaceful but his hands clutching the blanket. Back downstairs, I couldn't sit still. I paced, my sneakers silent on the polished floor until I couldn't ignore the unease any longer. I crept toward the study, the door slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. Daniel wasn't working. He sat in the leather chair, staring at the wall, his hands folded in his lap. "Found everything?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound calm. He stood slowly, his movements deliberate, like a predator conserving energy. "That's a lovely scent you're wearing," he said, his smile curling into something sinister. Reminds me of someone. My blood ran cold, my feet rooted to the spot. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. You must be a student. College is expensive, isn't it? I nodded, backing away, my heart pounding so loud I feared he'd hear it. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a stack of cash, tossing it onto the desk with a soft thud. 15,000, he said, his tongue darting over his lips. All for one night with me. The air left my lungs, my vision narrowing to a tunnel. I think you should leave, I said, my voice barely audible. His smile didn't falter. Don't be difficult, Lisa. We both know you need the money. I reached for my phone, but his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with a force that made me gasp. No, you won't, he hissed, his breath hot against my face. I yanked my arm back, my scream caught in my throat as his grip tightened. Scream all you want, he said, his voice low and terrible. No one's coming. They never do. You're mine. Panic surged through me, a primal urge to survive. I drove my knee upward, aiming for anything, and bolted, my sneakers slipping on the polished floor. The front door wouldn't open, the security panel blinking red, mocking me. Behind me, Daniel laughed, a sound that crawled under my skin. I ran to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I yanked open drawers, searching for a weapon. My fingers closed around a knife, its blade glinting. In the dim light, Daniel's footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing through the house like a hunter savoring the chase. 7 girls before you, he said, his voice carrying from the hallway. None of them were missed for days. I gripped the knife, my hand trembling, my breath shallow. Stay back, I said, my voice cracking as he appeared in the doorway, his smile a grotesque mask. I threw the knife, not to kill but to distract, and sprinted upstairs, my legs burning. Ethan's room was empty, the bed unmade, the air heavy with fear. Ethan, I called, my voice desperate. A small hand grabbed mine from the closet, Ethan's eyes wide with terror. He always does this, he whispered, his voice barely audible. He comes when they leave. Footsteps echoed on the stairs, Daniel's voice drifting up, mocking and sing-song. I can smell your fear, little girl. I grabbed the landline by Ethan's bed, my fingers fumbling as I dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was a lifeline. But before I could speak, Daniel burst into the room, blood dripping from his shoulder where the knife had grazed him. In his hand was a zip tie, its plastic glinting like a promise of captivity. You stupid, stupid girl, he growled, lunging for me. I shoved Ethan behind me, my body a shield, as Daniel's hands closed around my arms. We struggled, tumbling out of the room, my fists pounding against him, my kicks wild but ineffective. He was too strong, his weight pinning me to the floor, his breath hot and sour. Just as I thought it was over, sirens pierced the night, their wail a beacon of hope. Daniel froze, his face draining of color. Who called the cops? He screamed, his voice a mix of rage and fear. Ethan stood on the stairs, tears streaming down his face. I did, he said, his voice trembling. I hate you. I hate Mommy and Daddy too. The police stormed in, tackling Daniel to the ground, his curses fading as they dragged him away. He shouted about bail, but his words were hollow, a desperate plea against the inevitable. The aftermath was a blur. Paramedics' statements, the cold weight of a blanket around my shoulders. Daniel was a monster, a predator who targeted 6 babysitters before me, their disappearances buried under the Carters' wealth. The Carters were arrested, their complicity a betrayal that left Ethan orphaned. He was placed in foster care, his small hand clutching mine as we said goodbye. You saved me, he whispered, but I shook my head. He'd saved me. his courage a light in the darkness. I visit him sometimes, watching him grow, his eyes still carrying the weight of that night. But Daniel's fate was sealed. A week into his sentence, he was found unconscious, his brain hemorrhaging from an injury no one could explain. He survived, but he'll never walk again. A shadow of the predator he once was. I walk past the Carters' house sometimes, its windows dark, its grandeur a hollow shell. The night I survived replays in my mind, Ethan's words, a haunting echo. He always comes. I wonder if the house still watches, its glass eyes waiting for the next guest. I keep my knife close now, its weight a reminder that some doors should never be opened, and some homes are never safe. The mirror in the hallway gleamed under the morning light, but as I brushed down my shirt, a shadow flickered behind me. A small, blurred figure, too short, too still. I spun around, heart lurching, but the hallway was empty, its silence thick with the scent of fresh laundry and old wood. My reflection stared back, pale and trembling, and for a moment I swore my eyes weren't mine. They were smaller, darker, watching. Today was the day Ronnie Bateman, my first foster child, would arrive, and the house felt alive, holding its breath, waiting for him to step through the door. I'd spent weeks preparing the guest room, folding crisp sheets, arranging books on the shelf, each act a prayer to fill the void left by my mother's death. Her absence was a weight in my chest, a dull ache that flared at night when the house grew too quiet. Taking in a child was supposed to heal me, to give me purpose, a way to honor her memory. She'd always wanted me to help others, to be the light she'd been. But standing in that hallway, my hands shook, and the air felt heavy, like a storm. Gathering inside these walls, the knock came at noon, sharp and final, pulling me from my thoughts. I exhaled, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. Ronnie Bateman stood on the porch, smaller than I'd imagined for a 10-year-old. His frame thin, his brown hair tangled over dark, unblinking eyes. He clutched a tattered plush bear, its one eye dangling by a thread, and stared at me with a stillness that made my skin prickle. The social worker, a tired woman in a gray suit, introduced us, her voice clipped. "Ronnie's been through a lot," she said, handing me a folder. "He's quiet, but he'll open up." Ronnie didn't speak, didn't move, just watched me, his gaze a needle piercing my calm. When the door closed, the house seemed to shrink, the air denser, the silence sharper. Ronnie's voice broke it, soft but chilling. "Your hair's pretty," he said, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It should have been sweet, a child's compliment, but the way he tilted his head like a predator sizing up prey sent a shiver down my spine. "He's just a kid," I told myself, forcing a smile. "Thank you, Ronnie. Want some lunch?" He nodded, but his eyes never left me, tracking my every move as I led him to the kitchen. I made grilled cheese sandwiches, simple and warm, hoping to ease the tension. Ronnie sat at the table, bear propped beside him, and stared at his plate, unmoving. The sandwich cooled, the cheese congealing, and the silence grew oppressive, broken only by the hum of the fridge. "Not hungry?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Without warning, he shoved the plate off the table, the ceramics shattering across, the tiles, crumbs scattering like ashes. His eyes flashed dark and cold as he muttered, "I don't want this." My pulse quickened, but I knelt beside him, hands steady despite the fear creeping into my chest. "It's okay, Ronnie. We can do something else. What do you like?" His lips curled again, that slow, deliberate smile, and he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Let's play hide and seek." The words were innocent, but his tone wasn't, laced with something sharp, something hungry. I nodded, masking my unease, thinking a game might break the ice. "All right, I'll hide first," I said, forcing a laugh. I tiptoed through the house, the floorboards cool under my feet, and slipped into the hallway closet, its narrow space smelling of cedar and dust. For a moment it felt normal. A flicker of childhood joy, but then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, and a faint metallic scrape, like a blade dragging across the wall. "Caroline." Ronnie's voice sang through the house, high and lilting, a mockery of play. "I'm going to find you." My breath caught, my body rigid against the closet door. "It's just a game," I whispered. But the scrape grew louder, closer, each drag a pulse in my ears. I peeked through the crack, my heart slamming against my ribs. Ronnie stood in the hallway, a kitchen knife in his small hands, its blade glinting, under the light. His knuckles were white, his smile wide, teeth bared like an animal. Come out wherever you are," he crooned, dragging the knife along the wall, leaving shallow scratches in the paint. I eased the door open, barefoot, silent, my pulse roaring as I crept toward the back door. The house felt alive, its walls closing in, the air thick with the scent of metal and fear. A tiny hand grabbed my wrist, yanking me back. I spun, Ronnie's face inches from mine, his grin grotesque, eyes gleaming with glee. "Gotcha," he giggled, slashing the knife. It missed my stomach by inches, tearing my shirt, grazing my skin. Pain flared, hot and sharp, and I gasped, sprinting into the kitchen. My feet skidded on the tiles as I yanked open drawers, searching for anything to defend myself. Ronnie was fast, too fast, barreling around the corner, slamming into me with impossible force. The counter dug into my back, and the knife sliced my shoulder, blood blooming through my sleeve. "You're not fast enough," he sneered, his eyes wild, pupils swallowing the light. I stumbled back, gripping my shoulder. Blood slicked between my fingers. "Fight, Caroline. You have to fight." My hand closed around a heavy ceramic fruit bowl, its weight grounding me, and I swung it with all my strength. It smashed against his arm, the knife clattering to the floor. He laughed, a high, chilling sound, blood trickling down his arm. "You're fun," he whispered, stepping closer. "Want to play again?" I bolted for the front door, Ronnie's footsteps pounding behind me, small but relentless. I yanked the handle, but he slammed the door shut, his strength shocking, nearly crushing my hand. "No leaving," he hissed, his face inches from mine, breath hot and sour. Desperate, I shoved him back and ran to the laundry room, slamming the door, locking it with trembling hands. I pressed against the wall, panting, my heart threatening to burst. Through the crack, I saw his small, bloodied hand tracing the handle. "You can't hide forever," he whispered, his voice a blade in the dark. I dialed 911, my fingers slippery with blood, barely able to speak. "My foster son. He's trying to kill me," I choked out. But before I could give the address, the door burst open. Ronnie stood there, face blank, emotionless, head cocked like a doll. He strolled toward me, knife raised, eyes alight with something vile. I scrambled back, throwing a detergent bottle, towels, anything. He lunged, pinning me to the floor, his small hands impossibly strong. The knife hovered above my chest, and I screamed, "You don't have to be like your father." He smiled, slow and sinister. "I'm not like my father," he whispered. "He didn't kill anyone. I did." My breath stopped, horror flooding my veins. Every time he brought home a woman after Mom died, I didn't like them. He continued, his voice calm, triumphant. "So I played with them, with knives." He confessed so they wouldn't take me away. The knife swung down and I twisted, the blade slicing into the floorboards. I kicked his chest, sending him crashing against the wall. He scrambled up, giggling, blood dripping from his arm. I grabbed a broken lamp base, swinging it with desperate force. It cracked against his skull, and he crumpled, still smiling. I stumbled to my feet, vision swimming, and kicked the knife away. The police arrived as I reached the front door, tackling Ronnie to the ground. He didn't struggle, just smirked at me from the squad car, his eyes wide with glee. "See you soon, Caroline," he whispered, lips curling. "You're my favorite playmate." The paramedics bandaged my shoulder, but I barely felt the pain. I stared into the distance, the truth sinking in. The wrong man was in prison, and Ronnie's game wasn't over. Weeks later, I moved out, unable to sleep in that house. But one night, unpacking in my new apartment, I found it. A child's drawing tucked into my suitcase. A stick figure of me, red crayon dripping from a slashed neck. The air grew cold, and the mirror across the room flickered, showing a small, blurred figure behind me, smiling. I don't look in mirrors anymore, but sometimes in the dark, I hear a soft, lilting voice. Come out wherever you are." The hospital's fluorescent lights hum overhead, a relentless drone that burrows into my skull. It's my first day at Western Hill Medical Care, and the mountain air clings to my skin, crisp and heavy, as I step through the sliding doors just before dawn. I'm Lennon, a new nurse eager to prove myself, but the building feels wrong. Its walls too sterile, its silence too thick. The head nurse, a woman with tired eyes and a clipped voice, guides me through the wards, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. We're passing the psychiatric wing when a young caregiver bursts from a side corridor, his face pale, breath ragged. "Dorothy, she's had an episode," he stammers. The head nurse's brow furrows, and I feel a chill unbidden, as if the air itself knows her name. Against my better judgment, I raise my hand. "I'll take care of her." The head nurse hesitates, her eyes searching mine. "Are you sure, Lennon?" she asks, her tone heavy with warning. I nod, forcing a smile, though my stomach twists. I've trained for this. Elderly patients, difficult cases. I know the protocols. But as the caregiver leads me down the hall, his voice low, I sense I've stepped into something I can't unsee. "Dorothy's different," he murmurs. "Quiet most days, but she can turn violent. She's restrained for a reason. Her husband, he tortured her for years, beat her until she broke. He killed himself after, left her like this." The words settle like dust, heavy and inescapable. I swallow, my throat dry, and nod. The hospital's walls seem to close in, their white paint chipped in places, revealing gray beneath, like secrets seeping through. We stop outside a small room, its door heavy and scratched. Inside, the air is thick with the stench of urine, waste, and something sour, like sweat left to fester. Dorothy sits on the bed, her frail frame hunched, hands bound to her sides with padded restraints. Her gray hair hangs in stringy clumps, framing a face carved from stone, expressionless, eyes wide and unblinking like a predator waiting in the dark. The caregiver introduces us. "Dorothy, this is Lenin. She's here to help you. Will you cooperate?" Dorothy nods, a slow, mechanical motion, her gaze shifting to me. It's not a look of recognition, but something deeper, as if she sees through my skin to the fear I'm trying to hide. My pulse quickens, a drumbeat I can't silence. The caregiver wheels in a chair, laying a towel across it. Together we ease Dorothy from the bed, her body light but rigid, like a doll crafted from bone. Her skin is cold, clammy, and I fight the urge to recoil. "I'll take it from here," I say, my voice steadier than I feel. The caregiver glances at me, then at Dorothy, and leaves, his footsteps fading down the hall. Alone, I push the wheelchair toward the shower room, Dorothy's eyes burning into me. I force a smile, awkward and thin. "Let's get you cleaned up, Dorothy. You'll feel better." She doesn't respond, her silence a weight pressing against my chest. The shower room is small, its tiles cracked, the single fluorescent light buzzing like a trapped insect. I turn on the warm water, the steam rising in soft curls, and begin rinsing her arms, my hands gentle but trembling. The water patters against her skin, a soft rhythm that should be soothing. But the room feels smaller, the air thicker. Dorothy's eyes remain fixed ahead, empty as broken windows, reflecting nothing. I kneel to rinse her legs, my knees aching against the cold tile, when her voice cuts through the quiet, a whisper so soft it's barely there. "It's still inside the wall." My hands freeze, the sponge slipping from my fingers. "What did you say?" I ask, my voice tight. She tilts her head, an unnatural angle, her wet hair clinging to her face like spiderwebs. "Help me slice his throat in one go," she murmurs, her words slow, deliberate. "Do you know how people bleed when their veins are cut?" My heart stumbles, a cold sweat prickling my skin. I step back, the steam swirling around us, blurring the edges of the room like a dream turning sour. "Dorothy, are you okay?" I manage, my voice shaking. She smiles, a mechanical curl of her lips, her eyes blinking in unison, like a machine mimicking humanity. The smile isn't warm. It's a crack in her facade, revealing something dark beneath. "If I had it with me," she says, her voice dropping to a hiss, "I would have cut you all open." The light flickers, a brief plunge into darkness, and my breath catches. The room has no windows, just that single buzzing bulb. And in its faltering glow, Dorothy's face seems to shift, her eyes wider, her smile sharper. "Stay calm, Lennon." She's restrained. But the thought feels hollow. A lie, I tell myself, as panic claws at my chest. Then she moves. Her body jerks, the restraint straining as she thrashes in the chair, her arms yanking against the straps. Her face twists, rage carving lines where blankness once was. She screams, a sound that rips through, raw and blood-curdling like an animal caught in a trap. My feet root to the floor, my mind blank with shock. The screams don't stop, each one louder, more desperate, echoing off the tiles until the room feels alive with her fury. I stumble back, my hands fumbling for the door, but it's locked, the handle cold and unyielding. "Get out, Lennon. Now." The caregiver's footsteps pound down the hall, and the door bursts open, his face pale but determined. He jabs a sedative into Dorothy's arm, her screams fading to a whimper as her body slumps, her eyes rolling back. The caregiver pulls me into the hall, his hand firm on my arm. "It happens," he says, his voice strained. She lashes out. "Sometimes." But his words don't reach me. My ears ring, Dorothy's voice looping in my mind. It's still inside the wall. I force myself to speak, my voice barely a whisper. She said the weapon's in the wall." His face drains of color, his eyes darting to the room. "What?" he breathes. He hesitates, then speaks, his voice low. "The police never found it. Her husband's throat. Clean cut. Deep. They think it was a scalpel, something sharp." My stomach lurches, the hallway tilting. The walls seem to pulse, hiding secrets in their cracks. Months pass, but Western Hill never feels the same. I still work here, my hands steady as I change bandages, check charts, but sleep eludes me. At tea, night, Dorothy's eyes haunt my dreams, wide and unblinking, her whisper a constant echo. "It's still inside the wall." I avoid her room, but her presence lingers, a shadow in every corner. The hospital's walls, once sterile, now feel alive, their silence mocking me. I check the news obsessively, half expecting a report of a missing scalpel, a body found. Nothing. comes, but the fear remains, a cold weight in my chest. Part of me knows Dorothy wasn't lying. Somewhere hidden in these walls, that blade waits, its edge still hungry. I thought the cabin would stitch us back together, but all it did was unravel the threads of our lies. The memory of Jason's hand in mine, warm and steady on our wedding day, lingered as I stood before the Airbnb, a sleek wooden retreat nestled in a sea of pines. The air was thick with the scent of sap and earth, the forest stretching endlessly around us, its silence a promise of solitude. We'd come here to save our marriage, to rediscover the love that had once burned bright. But as I gazed at the cabin's dark windows reflecting nothing but the gray sky, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. This place wasn't a sanctuary. It was a mirror, ready to show us who we'd become. The drive had been long, 6 hours of winding roads through mountains that loomed like silent judges. Jason barely spoke, his eyes fixed on his phone, its screen glowing in the dim car. I'd stopped asking why he was so distant, stopped begging for the warmth we'd lost. The cabin was modern, all clean lines and glass, but its isolation was absolute. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, just us and the trees. I carried our bags inside, the wooden floor cool beneath my boots, the air heavy with the musty tang of a place rarely lived in. Jason slumped onto the couch, scrolling through his phone, ignoring the bags at my feet. "You know there's no Wi-Fi, right?" he said, his voice flat, a cigarette dangling from his lips despite his promise to quit. I nodded, my throat tight, and set about unpacking, hoping routine would anchor me. The cabin's interior was pristine, its furniture polished to a sterile sheen, but it felt hollow, like a stage set for a play no one wanted to perform. I opened a bottle of wine, its sharp aroma cutting through the stillness, and poured 2 glasses, handing one to Jason. He took it without looking up, his fingers brushing mine, a fleeting echo of the man I'd loved. We sat at the dining table, the silence between us a living thing, crackling with unspoken grievances. I remembered our first date, laughing over cheap pizza, his eyes bright with possibility. Now, those eyes were cold, guarded, hiding secrets. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "You've been quiet," he said finally, draining his 3rd glass. I sipped my wine, its bitterness mirroring my mood. "Just thinking," I said, my voice soft but heavy. He smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "Wow, new hobby, huh?" The words stung, a reminder of how far we'd fallen. I tried to keep the peace, to cling to the hope that had brought us here. "Why can't you just be nice for one day, Jason?" I asked, my voice trembling. He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping the floor, his face twisted with anger. "I can't play lovey-dovey in this dump," he snapped, hurling his glass into the sink, its shatter echoing like a gunshot. "I should have left when I had the chance." The words landed like a blade, slicing through the fragile thread of my patience. "Why didn't you?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. He stared, his eyes empty. "Because I wanted you to break first." He stormed out, the door slamming behind him, leaving me in the wreckage of our marriage. I stood, frozen, the cabin's silence swallowing his footsteps. I cleaned the broken glass, my hands steady but my heart racing, each shard a piece of the life we'd built. I finished his wine, its warmth spreading through me, and sat by the fire, the flames flickering like memories I couldn't hold. I didn't mean to find his phone. It was tucked behind the firewood stack, its screen dark but unlocked, a betrayal waiting to be discovered. Jason never changed his passwords, his arrogance, his undoing. I swiped through, my breath catching. As I found the messages, A cascade of ugly truths wrapped in emojis and late-night promises. He'd saved her as a single letter that tore my world apart. I'm done. She's pathetic, I'll tell her after the weekend. The words burned, each one a nail in the coffin of our love. He'd been planning to leave me, to discard me like a worn-out toy after all I'd given. Years of loyalty, dreams of a future, a heart that still ached for him. The pain was a living thing, clawing at my chest. But beneath it, something colder grew. Rage, sharp and unyielding. I remembered our honeymoon, dancing under stars. His promises whispered against my skin. Those promises were lies, and I'd been a fool to believe them. I walked to the fireplace, my fingers closing around a heavy antique metal vase, its weight a comfort in my trembling hands. I sat, the vase in my lap, imagining it connecting with his skull. Not to kill, but to make him feel the pain he'd inflicted. The cabin seemed to approve, its shadows deepening, its silence urging me forward. I waited, the fire's glow casting my reflection in the glass walls, a woman I no longer recognized. Jason returned hours later, his footsteps heavy on the porch, his silhouette framed in the doorway. He was dripping with sweat, his smirk a challenge as if he thought he could talk his way out of the truth I now held. Lena, he started, but I stood, the vase cold against my palm. I took one step forward, my voice steady. You should have left when you had the chance. I swung, the metal striking his temple with a dull thud, a clean, brutal hit. His eyes widened, a flash of shock before they glazed over, his body collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. I knelt beside him, my fingers finding his pulse, weak but there, enough to keep him alive for what came next. The cabin watched, its silence a conspirator in my crime. Dragging him was harder than I'd imagined, his dead weight pulling at my arms, the hardwood floor slick with his sweat. I heaved, my breath ragged, my muscles screaming as I pulled him out the back door, down the path through the trees. The forest was alive, its branches whispering encouragement, its shadows hiding. My sin. The waterfall roared ahead, a 500-foot drop that had drawn me to this cabin, not for its beauty but for its promise of oblivion. I'd seen it in the Airbnb photos, a chasm that swallowed secrets whole. I dragged Jason to the edge, the moss, slick beneath my boots, the spray cold against my face. He groaned, dazed, his eyes fluttering open. Perfect timing. I leaned down, brushing his damp hair from his forehead, my voice a whisper against the roar of the falls. This is what you get for betraying me. Goodbye, darling. I pushed, my hand steady, and he fell, his body vanishing into the white roar below, the silence that followed louder than any scream. I stood there, the forest holding its breath, the waterfall's mist clinging to my skin. The current would carry him miles away, the rocks stripping his face of features, the cold, preserving him in a grave no one would find. I walked back to the cabin, my steps deliberate, my mind clear. I peeled off my soaked clothes, the fabric heavy with guilt and triumph, and began the final act. I sliced my palm, the pain sharp but grounding, blood welling like tears I couldn't shed. I bruised my shoulder against the counter's edge, the ache a badge of my survival. I smashed the mirror, its shards scattering across the tile, each one reflecting a fragment of the woman I'd been. I picked up the phone, my voice trembling just enough. My husband, I said, the words practiced but raw. He snapped. He said he couldn't take it anymore. He hit me, he ran into the woods. I think he's going to hurt himself. The police believed me, their faces soft with pity as they draped a blanket over my shoulders. I cried on cue, my tears as real as the pain I'd buried. I told them of Jason's cheating, the threats he'd never made, the bruises I'd hidden for months, lies woven with just enough truth to hold. They promised to search, their flashlights sweeping the forest, blind to the truth at the bottom of the falls. The cabin stood silent, its glass walls reflecting their lights, a witness that would never speak. I left the next morning, the key returned to the lockbox, the Airbnb a chapter closed. They're still searching for Jason, their efforts futile against the river's hunger. I drive home now, the highway stretching before me, the weight of my secret a quiet companion. The woman I was is gone, drowned in that waterfall with Jason. What remains is something new, stronger, colder, free. The laughter of Trevor and Cassie echoed through the trees, sharp and careless. But in the darkness beyond the firelight, something else moved. Footsteps, slow and heavy, circling us like a predator. I stood frozen, the Alabama night wrapping around me, humid and thick, the scent of pine and betrayal choking my lungs. 2 years with Trevor, 2 years of promises, and now I knew the truth. He'd been slipping into Cassie's bed, my best friend, while I slept alone. This camping trip was my chance to end it, to make them face me. But the forest felt alive, watching, waiting for blood. The sun had dipped below the horizon when we arrived at the campground, a secluded clearing nestled deep in the pines. Trevor picked a spot tucked into the trees, the kind of place where shadows clung too tightly, where screams might never reach the road. I'd almost refused to come, my heart raw from the texts I'd found on his phone, late-night whispers to Cassie, saved as L as if I wouldn't notice. But I wanted them to see my face when I called them out, to feel the weight of their betrayal. Jordan, our mutual friend, was there too, oblivious, lugging coolers and grinning like a kid. The air was warm, the summer breeze carrying the earthy ding of moss and the faint sweetness of wildflowers. But my stomach churned, heavy with rage. We set up camp as dusk fell, the sky bruising purple. Trevor strung lights around the tents, his laughter too loud, his eyes avoiding mine. Cassie danced to Post Malone's beats blaring from Jordan's speaker, her hips swaying like she was auditioning for a music video, her blonde hair catching the firelight. I sat on a log, gnawing chicken wings, the grease slick on my fingers, feeling like a ghost in my own life. They didn't notice me watching, didn't see the knife of my anger sharpening with every glance they shared. I'd heard stories of campers vanishing in these woods, whispers of a group years ago who'd left their tents behind, their gear untouched. I'd laughed it off then, but now the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches clawing at the stars. The fire crackled, spitting embers into the night, and the group grew sloppy with beer and tequila. I sipped water, my head clear, my plan forming. I'd confront them after midnight when the alcohol dulled their defenses, when Jordan's presence would force them to face the truth. But then it happened. A soda can rolled into our circle, glinting in the firelight, stopping at my feet. I frowned, reaching for it, but before I could touch it, a thick cloud of smoke erupted, acrid and choking. My eyes burned, my throat closed, and the world spun into darkness. What's happening? Jordan's voice was a distant cough, Cassie's scream a fading echo. I fell, the ground cold against my cheek, and the forest swallowed us whole. Woke to a throbbing skull and the scent of damp earth, my wrists bound with rough rope that bit into my skin. The room was dim, lit by a single bulb swaying overhead, its light casting jagged shadows on concrete walls. Trevor, Cassie, Jordan, and I sat in a semicircle, our chairs creaking under us, our breaths ragged. My head spun, the smoke's aftertaste bitter on my tongue. "What is this place?" Jordan groaned, his voice thick with fear. Trevor muttered, his eyes darting, sweat beading on his brow. Then it came, A slow, deliberate clap, echoing like a gunshot. A man stepped from the shadows, his silhouette tall and angular, his grin wide and unhinged, like a mask carved from bone. His eyes gleamed under the bulb, too bright, too hungry, and his voice was a gleeful drawl. "Welcome to my party," Cassie sobbed, her mascara streaking, begging to be let go. The man cocked his head, his grin never faltering, and produced a hunting knife, its blade catching the light. He dragged it across Jordan's arm, blood welling in a thin line. Jordan flinched, his cry sharp, his shirt blooming red. The man chuckled, stepping back, twirling the knife like a toy. "You haven't accomplished anything good yet," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Trevor squirmed, his face pale. "Let us go, man, you're insane." The man's eyes locked on him, and he moved closer, pressing the knife's tip against Trevor's cheek. Blood trickled, and Trevor's scream tore through the room, raw and desperate. I watched, my heart pounding but my face still, a mask of calm I didn't feel. Cassie wailed, her pleas a frantic blur, but the man turned to me, his head tilting. "Curious. You're not scared, sweetheart?" I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the fear clawing my chest. "No." His eyes narrowed, intrigued, and he crouched before me, the knife resting on his knee. "Go on, tell me your story. You're in control. Speak." I leaned forward, my voice low, deliberate. "My boyfriend and best friend are screwing each other behind my back." Trevor's eyes widened, Cassie's face drained of color, her denial stumbling out. The man whistled, clapping his hands, his laughter a jagged edge. "Plot twist. I like you." He pointed the knife at Cassie. Then, "Jordan, I'll let you live, but you help me bury them, deal?" I didn't hesitate. "Deal." Cassie screamed, her voice breaking, begging for forgiveness, but I felt nothing, only the cold satisfaction of my plan unfolding. Jordan's eyes met mine, accusing, but I looked away. The man grabbed Cassie by the hair, dragging her to a shallow pit at the room's edge. The knife flashed, slicing her throat in one swift motion. Blood sprayed, soaking the dirt, her body crumpling into the hole, her eyes locked on mine as life faded. Jordan was next, the blade plunging into his chest again and again until he collapsed, his face unrecognizable. Trevor sobbed, shaking, his pleas a child's whimper. The man yanked him toward the pit, the knife poised at his throat. "This is... to act now." I lunged, grabbing a shovel from the floor, swinging it with all my strength. It cracked against the man's skull, blood rolling down his temple. He stumbled, dazed, and I swung again, harder, sending him into the pit with a sickening crunch. Trevor stared, wide-eyed, trembling. "You saved me." I said nothing, my breath steady, my heart calm. He clung to me, sobbing, promising never to hurt me again. The police arrived minutes later, their sirens cutting through the night. Trevor gave his statement, still shaking, while I sat in an ambulance, a blanket around my shoulders, sipping water. The cameras rolled, the press swarming, and I turned to them, my lips curling into a faint smile. "It's not easy fooling a hitman," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But I passed with flying colors. The plan had been mine from the start. I'd found the hitman online, a shadow in the dark web, promising vengeance for a price. Trevor's betrayal, Cassie's smug glances. They'd burned me, hollowed me, and I wanted them to pay. Jordan was collateral, a witness who knew too much. I'd played the victim, the scared girlfriend, but every move was calculated. Tell a lie, the hitman was my test and I'd won. But that night in my motel room, a message blinked on my phone from an unknown number. "Good game, let's play again." I deleted it, but the forest's shadows followed me, and sometimes in the quiet, I hear his laughter, waiting for the next move. The classroom smells of chalk and stale coffee. Mr. Carter's voice droning on about quadratic equations like a lullaby I can't escape. I'm slouched in my seat, texting Liam about weekend plans, my thumb flicking across the screen. It's just another Friday, the clock ticking toward freedom. 2 periods left until the bell, but something feels off. A prickle at the back of my neck like the air's holding its breath. I glance at Liam, his grin lighting up the room, and try to shake the feeling. Then the intercom crackles, sharp and sudden, slicing through the monotony. Attention, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Proceed to designated safe areas immediately. My heart stumbles, the phone slipping in my hand. Liam's eyes meet mine, wide and searching as the world tilts into a nightmare. The classroom freezes, Mr. Carter's marker hovering mid-equation, his face draining of color. Nobody moves, the words "not a drill" echoing like a death knell. I've done these drills before. Hide under desks, stay quiet, wait for the all clear. But this is different. The intercom's tone is shrill, urgent, a scream trapped in static. My pulse hammers, a relentless beat as I scan the room. Kids are staring, some giggling nervously, others clutching backpacks like shields. Liam nudges me, his voice low. "Noah, what's happening?" I shake my head, my mouth dry, but then I see him. Ryan sprinting past the classroom door, a hunting knife gleaming in his hand. His hands are red, slick with blood, and his eyes. God, his eyes are empty, black voids that suck the light from the room. A smile curls his lips, sick and gleeful, and my stomach lurches. Mr. Carter lunges for the door, his hands fumbling with the lock. "It's jammed," he hisses, panic cracking his voice. Ryan slams against the glass, his laughter high and childish, a sound that doesn't match the blood smeared across his face. "Let me in," he sings, his voice lilting like a twisted nursery rhyme. "Let me in or I'll blow your pretty little heads off." My breath catches, my body rigid. Liam grabs my arm, yanking me toward a desk. "Noah, help me," he whispers, dragging it to barricade the door. We shove it against the frame, the wood groaning, just as Ryan's knife slips through the gap, its blade inches from my eye. I stumble back, my heart a trapped animal. "Stay alive, Noah, for Liam." Ryan's eye presses against the window, bloodshot and unblinking. "I can smell your fear, Noah, baby," he murmurs, inhaling deeply. "It's delicious," his words crawl. Under my skin, a violation I can't shake. "I've been practicing for this day," he says, his voice soft, almost tender. "The others didn't scream enough, I know you'll shriek." My knees buckle, but Liam's hand steadies me. A memory flashes. Last summer, Liam and I biking. To the lake, his laughter echoing as we race through the dusk. Now his face is pale, his jaw set, but his eyes burn with defiance. Shouts echo in the hall. Teachers and security rushing past, their voices a chaotic blur. Ryan steps back, his head tilting like a curious dog. "Hide and seek," he whispers, his smile widening. "Ready or not," Liam hisses. "Now!" And we yank the desk away, bolting for the door. The hallway is a nightmare. Sprinklers drenching everything. The floor slick with pinkish water. Bloody handprints smear the walls, trailing where someone dragged themselves away. 2 freshmen huddle by the lockers, clutching gashes, their faces ghost white. "He cut us," one whimpers. "Just watched, said he loved our pain." My stomach churns, but I keep moving, Liam's hand gripping mine. Halfway down the hall, Ryan appears, motionless at the far end, knife raised, head cocked at an unnatural angle. He pulls off his hoodie, revealing a vest rigged with wires and bulging packages. "No more running," he calls, his voice echoing, then softer, intimate. "I need to see inside you, Noah." My blood freezes, the world narrowing to his eyes, black and endless. We run, our shoes slipping on the wet floor. Liam stumbles, crashing into the lockers, his breath ragged. I reach for him, but Ryan's there, moving too fast, his knife slashing. I swear his feet barely touch the ground, a shadow given form. I rip a fire extinguisher from the wall, its weight cold and heavy, and swing it, connecting with Ryan's shoulder. He doesn't flinch, his smile widening. Tickles, he giggles, his eyes dilating, pupils swallowing the irises. Want to see what real pain looks like. He lunges at Liam, the blade missing by inches as Liam dodges. We reach the emergency exit, its window flashing red and blue from police lights outside. Salvation, so close. Liam turns to me, his face pale, voice shaking. "You go first, Noah." I grab his wrist, desperate. "No, together." He shakes his head. "Don't waste time. Hurry." I step through, the night air burning my lungs. I turn back, reaching for Liam, our fingers brushing. "Hold on, Noah, don't let go." But Ryan's there, a shadow behind him, his eyes locking on mine. His arm plunges forward, the knife sinking into Liam's back. Liam's eyes widen, his mouth opening in a silent gasp. "No!" I scream, my voice raw, but Ryan's face twists with pleasure, his eyes rolling back as he twists the blade. His tongue darts out, tasting the air like a snake. "Beautiful," he sighs, as if witnessing a miracle. The blade flashes again, slicing Liam's side, blood spilling in a dark cascade. I clutch his hand, my fingers slippery with his blood. "Just hold on," I beg, tears burning my eyes. Blood bubbles from his mouth, but he smiles, faint and fleeting. "Live your life, mate," he whispers, his fingers going slack. He falls, his body crumpling to the concrete, and my world shatters. Cops rush toward us, their shouts a distant roar. They tackle Ryan, who doesn't resist, his eyes fixed on me over their shoulders. "I'll see you in your dreams, Noah," he says, his voice cutting through the chaos, his smile unnatural, carved from madness. I collapse, my hand still reaching for Liam, his blood sticky between my fingers. Paramedics swarm, but it's too late. Liam's gone, his eyes empty, his smile frozen. I sit on the curb, wrapped in a shock blanket, staring at his bloodied school ID. Dawn breaks, pale and cold, but the darkness lingers. At night, I feel Liam's hand slipping from mine. My dreams a loop of Ryan's eyes. His whisper, "He's coming for me." The guards say he doesn't sleep, just sits staring at walls, smiling. And in the quiet, I swear I feel him watching, waiting to finish what he started. The forest didn't sleep that night, and neither did I, not with the cliff's edge whispering my name. I stood at the summit of the trail, my boots sinking into the soft earth, the vast wilderness sprawling below like a sea of shadowed secrets. The air was sharp, scented with pine and the faint musk of damp stone. The kind of place where you could lose yourself and never be found. I'd come here alone, a solo hiker seeking silence after months of city noise and a life that felt like it was unraveling. The cliffside was my chosen camp, a flat outcrop overlooking a 500-foot drop, promising a sunrise that would burn away the weight in my chest. But as I pitched my tent, the forest's gaze pressed against my back, a warning I couldn't shake. The trail had been grueling. 8 miles of twisting paths through dense pines, my pack heavy with gear and memories I wanted to bury. I'd left behind a job that drained me, a breakup that left scars, and a family too busy to notice I was gone. This hike was my reset, a chance to breathe without the world's demands. The cliff was perfect, its edge a stark reminder of how close I could stand to oblivion without falling. I set up camp as the sun dipped below the ridge, painting the sky in hues of fire and ash. The tent snapped into place, its nylon taut against the wind's probing fingers. I built a small fire, the flames crackling with a restless energy, and roasted a piece of steak on a sharpened twig, the sizzle grounding me in the moment. The stars emerged, a billion pinpricks of light, and for a few hours I felt free. The forest's silence a balm to my soul. Night deepened, the kind of darkness that swallows sound and sight. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, the tents, walls a fragile shield against the vast unknown. The wind sang through the pines, a low moan that lulled me toward sleep. I dreamed of my ex, her laughter fading into the city's hum, a reminder of why I'd fled. But at exactly 2:36 a.m., I woke, my heart pounding, the dream shattered by a sound that didn't belong. Voices, low, urgent, cutting through the wind's song. I lay still, my breath shallow, straining to listen. Then came another sound, a slow, deliberate drag, like something heavy being pulled across the earth. My skin prickled, a primal fear stirring in my gut. Who's out here? This was a remote trail, miles from the nearest road, a place where only the desperate or deranged would wander at this hour. I slid toward the tent's entrance, my fingers trembling as I unzipped it just enough to peek out. The fire had died, to embers, casting a faint glow over the clearing. Two figures stood 50 yards away, their silhouettes stark against the moon's pale light. A man and a woman, mid-30s, their faces hidden in shadow. They were dragging a large duffel bag, its bulk sagging as if it held something heavy, too heavy for gear or supplies. My breath caught, my mind racing. A body? The thought was absurd, but the bag's shape, the way it resisted their pull, made my stomach twist. The woman spoke, her voice low but clear. "We're almost at the edge." The man replied, his tone clipped. "Careful. Spine's already broken. One toss, and it's gone." My blood ran cold, the words confirming my worst fear. They were disposing of something, or someone. I pressed myself flat against the tent's floor, my heart hammering so loud I feared they'd hear it. The dragging continued, the sound grating against my nerves, each scrape a step closer to the cliff's edge. I peeked again, my eyes adjusting to the dark. The bag left a trail in the dirt, a dark smear that glinted wetly in the moonlight. Blood. My hands shook, my mind screaming to stay still, to pretend I wasn't here. But the woman stopped, her head turning toward the trees, her eyes scanning the darkness. "You sure we're alone?" she asked, her voice tight. The man tilted his head almost lazily. "Thought I heard something." I flinched back, my hands covering my mouth, my pulse a roar in my ears. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with menace. A twig snapped closer, too close, and I prayed they hadn't seen my tent, tucked behind a gnarled pine. The cocaine, dragging resumed, and I exhaled, my body trembling. I peeked once more, seeing their backs as they moved toward the cliff. This was my chance. I crawled out, my knees sinking into the cold earth, and slipped behind a boulder, its rough surface scraping my palms. The tent was hidden but not safe, not anymore. I watched them lift the bag, their movements synchronized, and heave it over the edge. A wet thud echoed from the valley below, swallowed by the river's distant roar. They stood there, staring, down, their silhouettes like children tossing stones into a stream. Then the man turned, his eyes locking with mine for a fraction of a second, a predator's gaze that froze my blood. "I know you're watching," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. My legs moved before my mind caught up, a blind sprint uphill through the trees. Branches clawed at my face, tearing skin, but I didn't stop. My boots pounded the dirt, my breath ragged, the forest a blur of shadows and pain. Behind me, flashlights flickered on, their beams slicing through the dark like knives. The woman's voice chased me, sharp and desperate. "Wait, it's not what you think. We have money, just talk to us." Her words were a lie, a lure to draw me back. I cut left, diving into thicker trees, hoping to lose them in the unfamiliar terrain. But deep down, I knew they knew these woods better than I ever would. My foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, mud filling my mouth, my knees burning. I scrambled up, my lungs screaming, driven by a single thought. I won't be their next body. A branch snapped to my right, too close. They were splitting up, hunting me like prey. I doubled back, aiming for the ridge trail that led to my car, a lifeline miles away. The forest was a maze, its paths twisting, its shadows hiding their pursuit. A sharp pain seared my thigh, a hot sting that made me gasp. I touched it, my fingers slick with blood. A knife, maybe, or a thrown rock. I didn't cry out, didn't dare. I rolled into a shallow ditch, pressing my body flat against the earth, the cold seeping into my bones. Footsteps echoed above, aimless, searching. "How could you let him go?" The woman growled, her voice laced with fury. The man's reply was even, chilling. "He didn't see your face clearly. Let's leave." Their steps faded, swift and silent, predators retreating into the night. I waited, my breath shallow, my body trembling from cold and fear. When silence returned, I crawled out, my thigh throbbing, and limped downhill. The sky was shifting, black giving way to pale yellow. The sunrise I'd come to see now a cruel irony. My car sat in the distance, a faint glint in the growing light. I ran, stumbling, gasping, every glance back expecting their shadows. The keys were in my pocket, a miracle I'd grabbed before fleeing. I fumbled, cursing, my hands slick with blood and mud, and jammed the key into the lock. The door swung open and I fell into the driver's seat, my chest heaving. I turned the ignition, the engine coughing, refusing to start. A face slammed against the passenger window, the man's eyes wild, blood on his hands, a knife gleaming in his grip. He didn't shout, just smiled, his lips moving soundlessly. I twisted the key again, the engine roaring to life. Tires spun, gravel flying, and I sped away, the man's figure shrinking in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station, an hour later, maybe more. My vision blurred, blood soaking my pants, my face scratched raw. I stumbled inside, barely coherent, and told them everything. The voices, the bag, the chase, the knife. The rangers listened, their faces grim, and called the police. They searched the cliff, but found nothing. No body, no blood, just my slashed tent, boot prints, and a long bloody drag mark leading to the edge. No missing persons were reported, no arrests made, no follow-ups. The police suggested I'd imagined it. Exhaustion, playing tricks on my mind. But I know what I saw, what I heard. The forest keeps its secrets, and those two are still out there, their eyes haunting every shadow I pass. I don't hike alone anymore, but sometimes in the quiet of night, I hear that dragging sound, and I wonder if they're still hunting. The mirror in the prom dressing room gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but as I adjusted my blue gown, my reflection flickered, and Casey's face stared back, pale, wet, her eyes black with contempt. I gasped, stumbling back, my heart hammering. But when I looked again, it was just me, Cammy Kim, sweat beading on my brow. The vulture crown waiting to claim me. The gymnasium buzzed beyond the door, a sea of laughter and music, but the air in here was heavy, thick with the coconut scent of Casey's shampoo, a ghost that wouldn't leave. Tonight I'd be crowned prom queen. but every step toward that stage felt like wading through the lake where my twin sister drowned. I smoothed my dress, my hands trembling, and tried to focus on the moment. Prom was my triumph, the spotlight I'd craved since Casey and I were kids, always competing, always measured against each other. She was the brighter star, louder, bolder, her laugh a magnet that drew everyone in. I was the echo, the quieter twin, forever in her shadow. But 6 months ago, at the lake, that shadow swallowed her whole, and now I stood alone, her absence, a weight in my chest. The crown was mine, but it felt stolen, its gold thorns digging into my guilt. The gymnasium sparkled with fairy lights, the air alive with the thump of bass and the sweet tang of punch. Dylan, my date, squeezed my hand as we stepped onto the dance floor, his smile warm but his eyes searching. "You okay, Cammy? You look pale." I forced a laugh, nodding, but the crowd blurred, their faces morphing into Casey's, smirking, accusing. I'd worked hard for this, campaigned with Alicia's help, smiled through every vote, but the applause felt hollow, like pity for the girl who'd lost her twin. "You're here. Own it." I straightened, letting Dylan lead me through the dance, but the coconut scent followed, clinging to my skin. As Principal Warner announced the prom queen, the crowd roared, and I ascended the stage, my legs heavy, the vulture, crown cold against my scalp. The spotlight burned, and for a moment I felt invincible. But then I glanced at the stage mirror, and my breath caught. Casey stood there, her blue dress dripping lake water, her lips curled in that familiar sneer. "You stole my life, twin." The music skipped, the lights flickered, and she vanished, but her words lingered, a blade in my heart. I waved to the crowd, my smile robotic, my pulse racing. It's not real. She's gone. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall, splashing, water on my face, trying to ground myself. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Wish you were me instead." My heart stopped. It was the same message Casey sent months ago, after our fight over Dylan, when she'd mocked me for being second best. Her phone was disconnected. I'd seen Mom cancel the plan. My hands shook as I blocked the number, but another text came. "Love that crown. Let's see how long you keep it." I dropped the phone, the clatter echoing in the stall, my breath shallow. Someone knows. Madison or Trent, maybe. They were always Team Casey. The week had been a spiral of unease. Alicia, who'd organized my campaign, fell down the bleachers during assembly, her wrist snapping in two. She swore someone pushed her, but no one was near. Josh, who joked I only won because Casey died, collapsed at lunch, vomiting violently, his face gray. Food poisoning, they said, but he'd eaten the same slop as everyone else. And Casey, she was everywhere. Her blue dress flashed around. Corners, her laugh echoed in empty halls. Her coconut shampoo lingered in the air. I told myself it was grief, guilt playing tricks, but the texts, the accidents, they felt too real, too deliberate. I remembered the lake, our secret place since childhood, where we'd shared victories and licked wounds. That October night, Casey was crueler than ever, her words cutting deeper than usual. Imagine if you'd been born first. You'd still be the second twin, always the echo. Her laughter stung and my anger flared, a fire I couldn't douse. I shoved her, not meaning to hurt, but she stumbled, slipped on the mossy rocks, and fell. Her skull cracked against stone, a sound that haunts my nightmares, and her body slid into the black water, ripples spreading until they faded. I stood there frozen, watching her sink, and walked away, my heart a stone. The prom's music pulled me back, loud and pulsing. "Get a grip, Cammy." I splashed more water, fixed my makeup, and rejoined Dylan on the dance floor. The Queen's Dance was announced, and he led me to the center, kissing my knuckles, his touch grounding me. The lights dimmed, the crowd circling us, their phones glowing like eyes. For 30 seconds I breathed, swaying with Dylan, the world soft and warm. Then the music warped, the speakers crackling with static, and a voice, my voice, cut through, clear and damning. I didn't mean to kill her, I just wanted her to shut up just once. I wanted to win. The gymnasium froze, gasps rippling through the crowd. Phones flashed, recording, their lenses weapons aimed at me. Dylan's hands fell from my waist, his face pale, horrified. "You killed your sister." The words broke me, and I collapsed. The vulture crown rolling across the floor, its thorns glinting. "I didn't do it," I screamed, but the lie choked me, my tears hot and useless. Security rushed the stage, teachers scrambling to the sound booth. Through the chaos, I saw her, Casey's blue dress moving in the crowd, her wet hair gleaming, then gone. My chest tightened, the air too thick to breathe. They held me in the chemistry lab, Principal Warner and 2 officers watching, their faces grim. Mrs. Green, my counselor, paced, muttering about confidential files, encrypted sessions. "Those recordings were private," she repeated, her voice shaking. From the lab window, I saw ambulances arrive, students trampled in the panic, their phones sharing my meltdown across the internet. An officer stepped out for a call, and through the cracked door, I heard fragments. No sign of a break-in. Then I saw her again, Casey, across the parking lot under a street lamp, her dress soaking wet, waving mockingly. My blood ran cold and it clicked. A truth sharper than any knife. There was no ghost, only me. I'd copied the therapy recordings weeks ago, driven by a need to confess, to punish myself. I'd sent the texts, staged Alicia's fall, Josh's illness, all to make the world see my sin. Part of me died with Casey that night. The good part, leaving a hollow shell that craved exposure. I smiled at Casey's hallucination as the officer returned, his voice low. "We found a video on the school server, uploaded from your account." My world collapsed, and Casey's voice whispered in my ear, clear and cruel. "Checkmate, loser." I laughed, a broken, jagged sound, and so did she. Months later, in the psychiatric ward, I sit by the window, the world outside gray and distant. My hands trace the same sketch. Casey's face, her eyes black, her smile cruel. The nurses watch me, their pity a weight I can't shake. Last night I found a note under my pillow, written in my own hand but not my memory. "You'll never wear my crown." The mirror in my room is covered, but sometimes in the dark, I feel her breath on my neck, and I know she's waiting, her laughter echoing through the lake in my mind, forever pulling me under. The living room glows faintly, the TV's flickering light dancing across the walls. Lily's sprawled on the couch, a tub of popcorn cradled in her lap, her eyes half closed as some cartoon hums in the background. It's been a week since we landed in this foster home, the Martins' place, with its creaky floors and too clean furniture. I'm scrolling through my phone, the quiet wrapping around us like a blanket, when the lights flicker, a brief stutter that makes my skin prickle. The TV goes black, the cartoon's laughter cut off mid-note, and the house falls into a silence so deep it feels alive. I sit up, my heart giving a sharp thud, and call softly, "Lily?" She stirs, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong, Max?" Before I can answer, a faint sound slices through the dark. A click, sharp and deliberate, from the front door. The air shifts, heavy with something I can't name. I freeze, my phone slipping in my sweaty palm, its screen casting a weak glow. Lily's eyes widen, her popcorn forgotten as we listen. The click wasn't the wind or the house settling. It was too precise, too human. My mind races, grasping for explanations. Maybe the Martins came back early from their dinner. But their car didn't crunch the gravel driveway, and their keys didn't jingle. Instead, the door creaks, a slow, agonizing sound, like the house itself is groaning in protest. Heavy footsteps follow, not the familiar shuffle of Mr. Martin, but a deliberate tread, boots on hardwood, each step a hammer against my chest. Glance at Lily, her face pale, her breath shallow, and know she hears it too. I slide off the couch, my knees trembling, and peer through the curtain. Two figures slip inside, their faces hidden by masks, their hands gripping crowbars and duffel bags. One twists a screwdriver into the lock, splintering the frame, and my stomach lurches. "Lily," I whisper, my voice barely a breath. "We need to hide." She nods, her eyes huge, and grabs my arm, her fingers digging in. We bolt down the hallway, our socks silent on the floor, the footsteps behind us growing louder. "In here," Lily hisses, yanking me into the coat closet. We crouch low, buried beneath jackets, their musty smell choking me. My heart pounds, so loud I'm sure they'll hear it as we huddle together, barely daring to breathe. "Stay quiet, Max. Keep her safe." The house erupts in chaos. Glass shatters, furniture thuds, drawers are yanked open. "Grab the silverware," one voice mutters, low and rough. "Find the safe," another growls, closer now. Lily's fingers tighten on my arm, her nails biting into my skin. I press my lips together, my chest burning from holding my breath. Then my phone buzzes, a stupid spam notification, its vibration a scream in the silence. I fumble to silence, my fingers clumsy, but it's too late. The footsteps stop. "You hear that?" one of them whispers, his voice sharp. "Yeah, closet," the other replies, and my blood turns to ice. Lily's body tenses against mine, her breath hitching. The closet door creaks open, slow and deliberate, and for a heartbeat my eyes meet his. A masked face, eyes glinting with cruel excitement. "Gotcha," he sneers, his hand reaching for us. Lily reacts first, yanking me out of the closet. We tear down the hallway, the man's boots thundering behind us, his laughter a sick echo. "Faster, Max," Lily cries, pulling me toward the stairs. My legs burn, my lungs screaming as we scramble to the second floor, slamming a bedroom door. Behind us, Lily shoves a dresser against it, her hands shaking, the wood screeching across the floor. I gasp, my heart a wild thing as we back away, the door rattling under his fists. "We need the window," I choke out. But before we can move, the door buckles, splintering as the second man kicks it down. "Where you going?" He laughs, his eyes wild, crowbar swinging lazily. We sprint for the attic, Lily pushing me ahead, my hands slipping on the shaky ladder as I climb. I reach the top, the attic dark and stifling, the air thick with dust and heat. Lily pulls the ladder up, her arms trembling, leaving the men below. "You can't hide forever, kids," one calls, his voice dripping with amusement. "We got all night." My chest tightens, the attic's shadows closing in, every creak a threat. Lily's breath is ragged, her face streaked with sweat. "What do we do?" I whisper, my voice cracking. She points to a rusty vent in the corner. "It's great bent and loose." "The vent!" she pants, prying it open with bleeding fingers. "Go, Max." I crawl inside, the metal cold and sharp against my knees, the shaft narrow and claustrophobic. Lily follows, her breath hot on my back as we inch forward, the darkness swallowing us. The vent twists, leading to the garage crawl space. We drop, down, hitting the concrete hard, pain flaring in my knees. Lily grabs my hand, pulling me toward the side door, but a shadow looms ahead. The first man's there, waiting, his mask glinting in the dim light. "Smart kids," he sneers, lunging for Lily. I don't think. I snatch a rusty screwdriver from the workbench and plunge it into his thigh. He screams, stumbling back, blood pooling on the floor. "Run!" Lily shouts, but the second man blocks the garage door, his crowbar raised. "Going somewhere?" he hisses. Lily grabs a bottle of turpentine from a shelf, hurling it at his face. It splatters, burning his eyes, and he howls, clawing at his face. We're almost free when he tackles Lily, slamming her to the concrete. She screams, his hand muffling her mouth, his weight pinning her down. I see the wounded man limping toward me, rage in his eyes. I grab the garage door handle, heavy and cold, and swing it down on his arm. Bone cracks, his scream piercing the air. I turn to Lily, her face bloodied, her teeth sinking into her attacker's hand. He roars, loosening his grip, and she shoves him back. Sirens pierce the night, a blessed sound, as blue lights flash through the windows. We stumble outside, screaming for help, the neighbors' porch lights flickering on. Cops swarm, tackling the men, their masks ripped away, revealing faces twisted with fury. Lily and I collapse in the back of an ambulance, trembling under thin blankets. My hands won't stop, shaking, the screwdriver's weight still heavy in my mind. Lily leans against me, her voice a whisper. "You saved me, Max." I shake my head, my throat tight. "No, you saved me." The Martins' house looms behind us, its windows dark, its silence mocking. We're safe, but the night clings, a shadow we can't shake. Every creak, every shadow carries their eyes, their laughter. I check the locks now, my heart racing, knowing safety is a fragile thing, easily shattered in the quiet. The house welcomed me with a smile I didn't trust, its walls too clean, its silence too heavy. I stood in the foyer, my sneakers squeaking on the polished hardwood, my backpack slung over one shoulder, heavy with the few possessions I'd carried. Through 5 foster homes in 3 years. Roy, my new foster father, closed the door behind me, his soft eyes crinkling as he offered a warm grin. "This is home now, Clara," he said, his voice gentle, like a father from a storybook I'd never believed in. After years of cold beds and locked doors, his kindness felt like a trap. But I wanted to believe it was real. The house smelled of pine cleaner and old wood, a stark contrast to the musty group home I'd left behind. I was 16, tired of running, and for the first time in years I dared to hope. The house was modest, a 2-story nestled in a quiet suburb, its white exterior unremarkable, but pristine. Inside it was orderly, furniture polished, shelves dusted, not a speck of chaos. Roy showed me to my room, a small space with a single bed, a desk, and a window overlooking a tidy lawn. "Make it yours," he said, handing me a key, its weight a promise of safety. I set my bag down, the floorboards cool beneath my feet, and ran my fingers over the quilt, its stitches tight and even, like someone had poured care into it. I remembered my first foster home, a cramped apartment where I'd hidden under the bed to escape shouting matches. This was different, or so I thought. Roy let me choose my meals, bought me new clothes, and didn't enforce a bedtime. It felt like freedom, but freedom always came with a price. Roy's rules came on the 3rd day, delivered over breakfast, his voice casual but firm. "Stay out of the basement," he said, stirring his coffee, the spoon clinking softly. "It's just storage, nothing you need." I nodded, my fork pausing mid-bite, the eggs suddenly tasteless. "And don't use the landline," he added, his eyes flicking to mine. "It's broken. If you need to call someone, ask me." The rules were odd, but I'd lived with stranger ones. Curfews, locked fridges, forbidden rooms. I brushed it off, telling myself Roy was just particular, a man who liked order. But as I washed the dishes, the kitchen's fluorescent light buzzing overhead, I felt the house watching. Its silence not comforting but probing, like it was waiting for me to slip. Life with Roy settled into a routine. School, homework, quiet. Dinners where he asked about my day. His questions too precise, too interested. I answered carefully, my words measured, my instincts honed by years of dodging danger. I'd run away from foster homes before, slipping out windows when hands lingered too long or voices turned sharp. Roy was different, his kindness disarming, but something in his gaze, too steady, too knowing, kept me on edge. I lay awake at night, the house's silence pressing against my chest, the darkness alive with possibilities I didn't want to name. I remembered a social worker's words, "Trust your gut, Clara." My gut was screaming, but I had nowhere else to go. On the fifth night, Roy left the house at 8, his car's headlights slicing through the dusk as he drove away. I was alone, the house's silence louder now, its walls seeming to lean in. I sat on the couch, my phone glowing with a mindless game, trying to ignore the unease curling in my stomach. Then I heard it, a heavy, dull thud from down the hall. I froze, my fingers hovering over the screen, my breath shallow. Another thud, sharper, like something falling against wood. My heart lurched, a cold wave washing over me. The sound came from the locked closet in the hallway, a door Roy always checked, its brass knob gleaming like a warning. I set my phone down, the screen's light fading, and stood, my legs unsteady. I crept toward the closet, the floorboards cool and slick, beneath my socks, each step amplifying the thudding in my chest. The house was too quiet, its silence a vacuum that sucked away courage. I pressed my ear to the door, the wood cold against my cheek, and heard it. Soft, uneven breaths, shallow and desperate, like someone fighting to stay alive. My hand trembled. As I touched the knob, locked as always, its resistance a barrier I couldn't ignore. I wasn't a stranger to locks. I'd picked them before, slipping into forbidden rooms to steal food or secrets. I pulled a bobby pin from my hair, my fingers slick with sweat, and worked the lock, each click a gamble with danger. The mechanism gave way, and I pulled the door open, the hinges silent but heavy. My stomach dropped, a sick lurch that stole my breath. Huddled in the closet's corner was a girl, no older than 10, her brown hair matted with grime, her pajamas torn and filthy. Her wrists were raw, shackled with metal cuffs that bit into her skin, blood crusted around the edges. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and terrified, a mirror of my own fear. "Please help me," she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely human. I stood frozen, my mind reeling, the closet's stale air thick with the scent of sweat and despair. What is this?" I choked out, my voice breaking. I knelt, my hands fumbling with the shackles, their cold metal biting my fingers. Her arms trembled, sticky with blood, and she clung to me, her grip weak but desperate. Before I could free her, the front door clicked open, the sound a gunshot in the silence. Roy was back. My heart stopped, panic surging through me like wildfire. I slammed the closet door, but it was too late. Roy's footsteps echoed in the foyer, heavy and deliberate, his silhouette filling the hallway. Our eyes met, and for the first time, his kindness vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that made my skin crawl. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low, each word a threat. I stepped back, pulling the girl behind me, her small body trembling against mine. "You lied," I stammered, my voice cracking, fear choking my words. "You're a monster." Roy moved faster than I expected, his hand clamping over my mouth, his fingers digging into my cheeks. I kicked, my heels scraping the floor, but he was stronger, his grip unyielding. The girl screamed, a shrill wail that pierced my ears. her voice raw with terror. Roy dragged me toward the basement door, his nails biting into my arm, his breath hot against my neck. I thrashed, my elbow connecting with his ribs, but he didn't flinch. He threw me against the basement stairs, the wood slamming into my back, stars bursting in my vision. The girl's sobs echoed from the hallway, a sound that tore at my heart. "Please don't leave me," she cried, her voice fading as Roy turned to her. He grabbed a coil of rope from the corner, his face twisted with rage, his eyes glinting like a predator's. "You shouldn't have opened that door, Clara," he said, his voice eerily calm, a stark contrast to the fury in his movements. I scrambled up, my body screaming, my hands searching for anything to fight back. My fingers closed around a broken jar, its glass jagged and sharp, glinting in the dim light. Roy lunged, his hand wrapping around my throat, squeezing until my lungs burned, my vision tunneling. I swung the glass, driving it into his thigh, the shard sinking deep. He roared, his grip loosening, his face contorted with pain. I kicked his wounded leg, sending him staggering, his curses filling the air. I ran, grabbing the girl's hand, her fingers cold and slick with blood. We bolted for the front door, my legs aching, my lungs on fire. Roy's footsteps thundered. Behind us, his voice a snarl. "Get back here," he shouted, his rage shaking the walls. I threw the door open, pushing the girl outside, her screams piercing the night, drawing the neighbors' attention. Lights flicked on, doors opened, and within minutes, 3 men rushed in, pinning Roy to the floor, his struggles futile against their strength. I collapsed on the lawn, my breath ragged, the girl clinging to me, her sobs a lifeline in the chaos. The police arrived, their sirens a distant wail that grew louder, a promise of justice. They arrested Roy, his face blank as they cuffed him, his eyes avoiding mine. The house was searched, its secrets spilling out like blood from a wound. 2 more girls were found, hidden in the basement, chained and starved, their eyes hollow but alive. The neighbors spoke for us, their voices a shield against Roy's lies. I sat in the ambulance, a blanket around my shoulders, my hands still. Trembling, the girl's gratitude etched in her tear-streaked face. I'd saved them, but the house's silence lingered, its walls whispering of the horrors it had held. I don't know what my life will be, but I carry that night with me, a badge of survival. The house is empty now, its windows dark, its secrets buried with Roy's conviction. But sometimes in the quiet of my new room, I hear that thud, feel the closet's cold wood against my cheek, and wonder how many other houses hold their breath, waiting for someone to listen.